The Martial Culture Podcast is brought to you by Warlocker. Protect your legacy with Warlocker. Visit war-locker.com for more information.
Recorded live from the mats of Radical MMA in New York City, the Martial Culture Podcast. Your source for in-depth combat sports and martial arts insights with Coach Renee Dreyfus and Matt Peters. Ring the bell and let's get it on.
All right, we're back.
We are here.
Let's go. Get into it.
Yes, absolutely. I am so happy and so honored, and I always say I'm very honored, but I really am super, super psyched about our wonderful and extraordinarily skilled guest we have on today, who's come on to talk about her mother and also herself and judo career in general. Jean, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Jean Kanakogi. Gosh, I don't even know where to start. Would you like a little bit of a background?
Yeah.
So why I'm here? Well, I'm thrilled to be here, by the way.
Yeah.
And just being able to talk to you and about your stellar career. This is given an opportunity to cross-mix and interplay the culture and the relationship between judo and MMA and BJJ and law enforcement. So this is great to have this conversation. So like I said, I'm Dr. Jean Kanakogi. I am a special agent with the U.S. government. I'm one of the co-authors of Get Up and Fight, which is the book about Rusty Kanakogi, the mother of women's judo. I'm the Director of Mental Health and Peer Support Services for the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association. And I just stepped up to be a volunteer on the Blue Hearts for Heroes Advisory Board, which is a new 501c3 that helps law enforcement families with special needs children.
Wow.
I was detailed as an instructor in the Behavioral Science Division at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. I do work with the Women's Sports Foundation. I'm a 5th degree black belt in judo, former member of the U.S. National Judo Team. Like I said, I'm Dr. Kanakogi, so I have a PhD in psychology, and I'm now working with FLEOA, which is the Federal Law Enforcement Agents Officers that's a mouthful. Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association, and USA Judo on programs to introduce martial arts to law enforcement to perhaps mitigate some use of force situations.
Well, actually, I wanted to speak about the book, but there's so many things we can touch on. But let's first talk about your amazing mother, who I had the honor of meeting about 30 years ago, and how women's judo would not exist without her. Her career is so amazing, and you just came out with the book, or is it ready to buy? I know you sent me the copy, but it's go ahead. Sorry.
It is. So we released the 40th anniversary of the first Women's World Judo Championship special edition, and that can be obtained on our website, rustykanakogi.com, and it's also up on Amazon in digital form now. And June 1st, we're having our global release with a new cover, a new look, and that we have a distributor so that you can get on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all over the place. But if you want your autographed copy, you have to get it through our website.
Okay. So just before we go into your background and everything you do, but let's tell a bit about your amazing mother. And how did she get started in judo? We don't want to do much of the book, but there's so many great stories, especially about the tournament where, we will go get into that. But how did she get started in judo? And I know she grew up here in New York. Please tell us about your mom and how her career began.
Rusty grew up in Coney Island, and back in the 40s and 50s, where it was kind of a rough neighborhood. You had to hold your own. So she was actually the leader of a street girl gang called the Apaches. She's always looking for a fight, always kind of in the middle of trouble. Not really starting it, but always found herself in the middle of it. And given that she grew up in such a terrible household, her parents were always fighting, she married early. And unfortunately, she married early into a marriage that was just a terrible marriage. There was a lot of alcohol involved. So she went to Al-Anon to try to support, at the time, her husband to stop drinking and get on the straight and narrow. And in Al-Anon, she met a friend who said, hey, I'm I'm practicing judo. And she's like, what's judo? I don't know what judo is. Never heard of that. Oh, it's a Japanese martial art. And back then in the 50s, Japanese anything was just looked at sideways. So she didn't have the wherewithal to even know what judo was. So he said, well, let me show you. And he picked her up with a judo throw, and like she was a lightweight piece of paper. Now, she was a 200-pound, 5'9", big, strong woman. And he picked her up like it was nothing. And she's like, oh, that's it. I need to learn about the Japanese culture because they have this sport judo, and I have to know this. So she followed him to his judo class at the YMCA in Brooklyn. And they wouldn't let her in the class because there were no women allowed. Women couldn't practice judo. It was unheard of for women to do full contact anything. So
well, that's interesting because I understood in Japan, of course, there was a long history, especially with Sensei Fukuda, of women competing. But back then in America, it was just, I guess, frowned upon, as you're saying.
That's true. Back then, and I'll tell you how she led up to practicing with Sensei Fukuda at the Kodokan in Japan. But she's at this judo class at the YMCA. They finally let her in, and the deal was that she would learn judo on one day, and then the next day she would teach it to the ladies. And the women's class was more of the progressive class at the YMCA. Well, she went with her team from the YMCA up to Utica, New York to cheer them on. They were competing for the national championships. And one of her teammates during the warm-up was injured. So they said, you know what, we're going to throw Rusty in his place. No big deal. She had short hair. She was not very well endowed. So she took an ace bandage, wrapped up her chest just to make sure that she really blended in. And they told her, don't call any attention to yourself. Just pull a draw. But all of her training and all of her thinking, well, I'm training like these guys. Why do I have to just pull a draw? Why can't I just do my best like judo teaches me? Well, she did her best, and she won. She threw her opponent, smashed this big, strong, hulking guy for a full point. And she said, wow, this is fantastic. Not only did I win, and then she said, oh, no, I won. Now what? So they won first place, and they were just celebrating, and they was just jubilant. They were just couldn't believe that they won first place. And they were about to get their awards. They got their awards. The medal was placed around her neck, and she said, this is fantastic. I'm actually getting a commendation, an award for fighting instead of a citation and a jail sentence. So she was thrilled. Well, when she was walking past the mat back to, I guess, either her car or to the restroom, the tournament director came up and said, hey, I need a word. And her first thoughts were, wow, maybe he was going to compliment me. And then right away, her go-to was, uh-oh, crap, something's going on. And he didn't even give her the decency to ask if she was a woman. He just, in a very terrible tone, said, well, are you a girl? And she just said, no, I'm a woman. And he's like, well, women are not allowed. We need that medal back. And right then and there, that was like a gut punch right to her stomach, because she didn't understand why she was being punished just for being a woman, why she had to give her medal back that she won fair and square. He said that if he didn't give the medal back, he was going to forfeit the team of their win, and everybody would have to. So everybody on her team actually joined up and said, yes, we'll give it back. That's not right. And she said, no, you earned it. So when she did give her medal back, that was truly a pivotal point in her life, saying that, you know what, no woman's ever going to feel like this ever again. Not this indignity on my watch. I have to do something. I don't know what that something is, but this has to change.
Now, it's interesting. I don't mean to interrupt, but it's very interesting because it was so much that competitive sports, not just contact sports, but competitive sports were considered such a male space. Like it reminds me of that time that the woman was the first female to run, I believe it was the Boston Marathon, and a man attacked her to stop her from running. It's so not progressive, but I guess that was the nature of the times, Mad Men and all that in the 50s. But there were certain male spaces that women were not allowed. And thank God for someone who was so brave to be such a pioneer to break those barriers.
Well, thank you. And this is in 1959, where women, the ads in the newspaper were, women take lessons how to cook and cater to your husband. And these were just ads in the newspaper at the time. Right next to the ad, sign up for Rusty Kanakogi, or at the time Rusty Stewart's judo class. So it was kind of the interesting dichotomy was there. And I found some old newspapers that actually show side by side, how to press your husband's pants and how to take a judo class.
It's interesting. I was just reading about this. How because of World War II, and you had so many women who were brought into the manufacturing sector to take the place of men. Manufacturing now was so liberating and gave them a taste of what it meant to be in a progressive society. Yet the minute they come back, the strictures on gender-based roles were just put right back into them. But I don't think once you've let the genie out of the bottle, I don't think it's so easy to put it back in. So it was definitely a time that we can say was ripe for a revolution.
It's interesting. Rusty was definitely the revolutionist. Because that genie was not going back in the bottle. I wonder maybe if that's how I ended up with my name of Jean. So that genie was not going back, and women were not allowed in certain places. Earlier, prior to recording, we talked about the New York Athletic Club. Well, Rusty had to go up the back door, go in the back door. She wasn't allowed in the front door. Women were not allowed in the New York Athletic Club. And interestingly enough, years later, she was awarded and inducted into the International Judo Federation Hall of Fame as the first American woman. And I received the award on her behalf posthumously, and I walked through that front door to go get the award. So it's amazing. And from that 1959 experience, she wanted more. Again with separation, but she went to Japan to train at the Kodokan. She wanted to learn more about judo. She wanted to study from the birthplace of judo. She ends up at the Kodokan, and they placed her on the women's side of the dojo. There were the men's side and the women's, and that's where she met Sensei Fukuda. They became really good friends, and Sensei Fukuda and her team were practicing tons of kata. So Rusty built an amazing kata foundation. And for those of you that don't know, kata is the artistic, beautiful forms and formation of the throws, and really the precision. It's almost like a judo dance. It's just absolutely gorgeous. But Rusty wanted the fight. She wanted the combating feeling. She wanted the throws and the chokes and the actual brawl. Well, finally, they let her into the men's side of the dojo, and she was the only woman on the men's side of the dojo. And that Japanese mantra, fall down 7, get up 8, was her life every day times 10, because all she did was take a beating every single day, but she kept on getting up. And she made a lot of friends. She trained with some of the 1964 Olympians, Jim Bregman, and she trained with Ben Nighthawk Campbell and so many people at the Kodokan. She made one very, very special friend, and that's my father, Yohei Kanakogi.
Well, yes, that's a wonderful thing. So she broke down the barriers both here and in the Kodokan. And it's funny because I never actually trained at the Kodokan, but I never knew that women were only doing kata, because when I was there, it was just women just trained like everybody else. It was no big deal. So obviously she was groundbreaking there. Had no idea actually. So how long did she stay in Japan, and where did her career go from there?
She stayed in Japan. Let's see, she was there in 1962. She stayed there probably a little shy of a year. Came back, and she was teaching judo all over the place, especially at the Y. At that time, they were putting together national championships. Now women's judo was progressing. She was teaching, and more women were doing judo. And so she was training, I think in the 70s, for the nationals. And in 1974 was the first nationals that women could compete in. And at the time, she was in the same weight category as her good friend Maureen Brazil, who's also just a trailblazer in women's judo. So Rusty wanted to drop a whole weight class, and so she didn't have to fight against her friend and her training partner. Well, not only did Rusty drop a weight class, Rusty dropped at the scale because she dropped, I think, 12 pounds in 2 hours. Oh. And she got on the scale, and it nearly killed her, and that was the end of it. From there, Rusty went into coaching, refereeing, and advocacy for women's judo because she felt that women's judo needed to be in the Olympics. Women's judo, men were having, in 1964, men were included in the Tokyo Olympics for the first time. Women's judo was not, and she couldn't understand why not women. You know, her favorite question that she asked all the time, regardless of what you were doing, was why not? Why, you know, you didn't win. Why not? You didn't get an A in school. Why not? You didn't lose 3 pounds. Why not? It was so appropriate for Rusty, so concise, so to the point, but she held you accountable. And that's what she did.
That's wonderful. I just want to say, you know, it's kind of interesting because MMA kind of had this similar trajectory where in the UFC it was only men. And I remember a time where the people who ran the UFC were like, we will never have a women's division. We will never have women fighting. No, there's no market. There's no this. There's no that. And then of course along comes Ronda Rousey and just says, no, that's not going to happen. I think it's wonderful that a judoka took that same, not a direct line, but that same inspiration and the same kind of pioneering spirit that your mother had, and was only there because of your mother. Ronda Rousey and her mom exist because, you know, and their competitive careers exist because your mother made a place for them, and then she was able to break the barriers in the UFC.
That's true. You know, going back to women's judo needing to be in the Olympics, and then we'll touch upon Ronda and her mom, because Rusty said, well, how come women's judo is not in the Olympics? And at that time, U.S. judo were run predominantly by like a good old boys network, a whole bunch of misogynists that, well, you know, ladies need to this and that.
And I know exactly what you're talking about, and we won't say names.
Oh, heck, I'll say the names. They're in the book. Because Rusty told me, don't change a damn thing in that book. You know, history needs to be told, and otherwise it risks being repeated.
Yeah.
So they told her, well, you know what, Rusty, if you want women's judo to even be considered in the Olympics, you need to have a world championships. And they told her that almost like in a schoolyard fight tone. Well, you know what, you need a world championship, so there. And Rusty said, well, fine, I'll hold a world championships. And they said, oh, yeah? Well, where are you going to do this? And, of course, Rusty, you know, never backing down from a fight, she goes, I'll have it at Madison Square Garden. And she couldn't pull those words back afterwards. And going up against the good old boys, well, she's going to stick to her word. They laughed. They're like, yeah, Madison Square Garden, you go ahead and do that. Well, Rusty came to judo that night, and she said to the dojo, I have an announcement. We're going to hold a world championships at Madison Square Garden. So my father, of course, looked at her and said, we don't have any money. We barely charge a mat fee. How are we going to do this? And she said, no, this needs to be done. She was on the phone constantly to get this World Championships off the ground. It was pretty much our dojo and local New York, New Jersey, Connecticut judo people that helped put this thing together. And she said people got their noses twisted because she charged everyone for a ticket. There was not one person that got a freebie because she had to pay for the garden. And she wheeled and dealed. She got sponsors. She had parents sewing on uniform stickers and patches. She had the U.S. team sewing their own patches on. Whatever she could do, she got Sassone Jeans to sponsor. And
that takes you back, Sassone Jeans.
Yes, Sassone Jeans to sponsor.
Too young to remember that one, Matt.
He went out and he told his head of outfitting to get sweatsuits for the women's judo team and they and they sent something like Spanx or something, and Rusty ran out to Macy's or Bloomingdale's and went out and bought all new sweatsuits, and then sewed the patches of Sassone over the sweatsuits that she bought. She's like, I'm not going to put these girls out like ballerinas. And so everything she did the announcing. She had to have 125 minimum competitors at this World Championships to be recognized as the first Women's World Judo Championships. And last year, 2020, was the 40th anniversary. First of all, these women are saying that they can't believe they weighed in on the same scales as Joe Frazier or Muhammad Ali to compete, and that Rusty was able to pull this off. She did it, of course, with the support of our dojo, my dad, and at the time, the president of the International Judo Federation just changed guards. And it was a Japanese man, Dr. Shigeyoshi Matsumai, who was the president of Tokai University. And she was at first a little concerned, saying, oh boy, I don't know about the support for women. Then she realized what a supporter Dr. Matsumai was. And he came through in the 11th hour with some money to help keep the doors open for Madison Square Garden.
Wonderful.
And it was amazing. My father had the color guard from the United States Merchant Marine Academy, doing everything, running mats across Midtown on dollies. So everything, and the gentleman that we were speaking about earlier from the New York AC pitched in. They helped our dojo, begged, borrowed, and stole, built things from scratch as things were happening at the whole time. I held the sign for the U.S. team, which was, I didn't realize, such a huge honor. And this is in 1980, where I was pretty much living off of M&Ms.
And it was a wonderful success, and that started the World Championships. It's fantastic.
That is, and that's where you say, there wasn't the judo career of Rhonda and her mom. Anne-Marie, Rhonda's mom, and Rhonda, by the way, I should just say they're fantastic people. They're good friends of mine and just really, really just wonderful people doing so many amazing things. Anne-Marie is brilliant. She's a PhD and
also in psychology, right? If I'm not.
No, I believe I think it's math or science, something way smarter than me. No, she's brilliant. And just so humble and so nice. And she is the first woman to have won a World Championships for the United States as a gold medal. At the time, she couldn't compete in the first Worlds. I believe she was pursuing her PhD. And at the time, there were just the dates were start and stop, because there was no solid sanction to have this event until the last minute. So I don't think she could commit at the time, and she pursued her studies, but then she went and won the next World Championships. Subsequently had Rhonda, who was our first American woman to receive a medal in the Olympics on behalf of the United States. So it's a beautiful trickle effect, and these women are trailblazers, and their success, I feel, is such a springboard off of the efforts of Rusty. Everything that Rusty did to open the doors, these women's success and their own drive are just paying it forward. And I'm grateful for all of these women that are succeeding because of the doors that were opened.
And it's fantastic because the women's division in MMA, every single competitor owes that to Ronda Rousey. For breaking the doors down in the UFC at least. Obviously Japan had female competitors before, but really the UFC is the number one game in town, and they owe that to her. And right now there's a tremendous amount of women who are making their career and promoting themselves and their athletic achievements through the UFC, and they just owe your mom a debt as well.
Thank you. Thank you. After the first Worlds, and then they had the second Worlds, Rusty got together with Dr. Matsumai and decided that women in Japan needed an international stage on their own home turf. And in 1983, they had the first Fukuoka Championships. And that was also a huge success. And we got a taste of how it felt to be a star. all of us got to Japan and people were asking for our autographs. RKB Mainichi Television sponsored it. It was a huge event, like we were baseball or football players in the United States when we went to Japan to compete. And I believe Anne-Marie was on the team then, so we traveled to Japan back then, and it was just amazing. So Rusty thought, with these world championships under our belts and with the first Fukuoka, women's judo should be included as an Olympic sport in 1984 in Los Angeles. And they told her no. Well, Rusty was reared up. She was not, no, it was not, never a word in her vocabulary, except when it came to giving me extra food or dessert. So, and growing up with her as my mom and my coach and mentor is a whole nother game. So as she went to the games in 1984 and teamed up with the American Civil Liberties Union. And she wanted to put an injunction on the Olympics. She wanted to stop the Olympics because of discrimination, because she sued the International Olympic Committee, and they were found guilty for discrimination.
Right, I know. It's amazing. And I didn't know this until I was reading the book, but she actually sued and won.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Yes, and I'm so privileged to be part of all of these lawsuits. As a young person growing up, I started to see early on as a teen, as a child, what discrimination, what an unfairness meant. And because Rusty never wanted more, she just wanted equal. She didn't want anything she didn't deserve, but she felt that women who train their guts out should have the same exact footing, the same exact accolades, and the same exact opportunities as the men. And she did not understand why. She learned from one of her mentors was her aunt, which was Lee Krasner Pollock, the wife of Jackson Pollock. And Lee Krasner pushed Jackson into the limelight, but Lee, in her own right, was an incredible artist. But
yes.
Because she was a woman, she was cast aside a bit. Not now, of course, but back then she was cast aside. So one of Rusty's mentors was Lee Krasner. And Lee, although she passed in '84, before she passed, she saw what Rusty was going through, and she told her, "You keep going, you don't stop, because this is your opportunity to make a difference." And that's what Rusty wanted to do. She wanted to make that difference. So in 1984, suing and trying to get the Olympic Committee, well, she got the Olympic Committee's attention. And in 1988, for the 1988 games, they still told her no. Well, finally, somebody got wise to it and said, well, perhaps we should put this in as a exhibition sport. And they told her yes. So in 1988, she was the Olympic coach and able to take three women to the Olympics. And that right there, that was her victory in 1988. That was amazing. And she did it. I asked her, well, why did you never give up? And she said, because they deserve it. And that was it.
And it's so, like, it just doesn't make sense to me, because I've actually trained with so many incredible female martial artists, but let's do that subset to judo. I one of the high points of my training in Japan was training with Yawara-chan, who's a very famous female Japanese judo fighter, who is also like a really wonderful person. And it was just a high point to just be thrown, deep into the mat at 90 miles an hour by her. But these are phenomenal athletes who absolutely deserve the stage. And if you look today, now there's so many amazing judo athletes who are stars in their own right, where you could talk about Uta Abe, you could talk about Daria Biladid from the Ukraine. You can talk about Krista Deguchi's competing for Canada. But these women are just as good as the men. Many of them are better. And they're also just incredible inspirational stars. So and wouldn't shine unless the Olympic venue was there for them. And it's great that it is, because they're just so amazing to watch. I was actually just watching Daria Biladid last night in her reverse triangle entry, and she's putting. I don't know if you saw that video where the girl defends, and it's just amazing. Like, they're just such phenomenal athletes. And you don't think I'm watching a female athlete. You think I'm watching an athlete. That's it. Period. There's no gender asterisks. Oh, they're just great. Period. I have to show you the video, Matt. It's unbelievable. So
the techniques that these women and men show. I mean, because back when you were at the Kodokan training, it was a lot of technician, but a lot of brute force, and with technology, being able to video and show what you're doing and then work on your techniques. We didn't have that coming up through the ranks. I mean, we had a VHS tape, and we can just go play it forward and play it backwards and freeze frame, so we can study what we were doing. But now with the instant video, and you could see what you did, see where your grip is, the technology has helped so much. But also the training and the recognition of equality has emerged so much in judo and in martial arts across. The videos you're referring to, the techniques are just absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah.
That it's just inspiring. And every single little girl that I see put on a gi and say, I want to be an Olympic champion, that's my mom's gold medal right there. And it just feels so good to know that I was part of this. I feel like I'm the daughter of women's judo because my signature is on all of these documents that we filed with human rights issues because of the discrimination, and just learning and watching and being in the shadows, and having my mother as my mother and my coach had its challenges. From being the Jewish mother, she wants to feed me. Being the coach, she took the food away, and she was like, "You have training in an hour." So, and then being at the dojo, of course, it's my mom. So she's like, "Okay, attack me," and then I'd attack her, and she would turn her head, not pay attention for a second. I threw my mother through the wall of our dojo. So, I mean, how many kids in school can go back to school in high school and college and say, yeah, I threw my mom through the wall this weekend?
That might bring like social services down for some reason, but that's amazing. I can only imagine how difficult it must have been to navigate that relationship. My wife and I don't have children yet, but I do teach my wife, and that is a difficult relationship right there. Though she's wonderful, and but how did you ever feel pressure because your mother was such an outsized personality? I know you're a great champion. You mentioned that you were ranked at 4th in the world. How was it getting out of your mom's shadow, or did you never feel that?
I felt like I was in her shadow. Sometimes it was a negative because I had some really big shoes to fill. One of the funny things that my mom and I used to always laugh at, I was probably the longest running brown belt in history of our dojo. They would not promote me to Shodan. They would not. So here I was competing. I think at the first Fukuoka in '83, I was competing, and I took a bronze as a brown belt, as a first degree brown belt.
But you're competing against black belts.
Oh gosh, I was competing against 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th degree black belts. And I told her, I said, don't you think it's time? Nope, not yet. So it's like, do I have to? I said, well, could you hurry up and get women's judo into the Olympics so I can go win an Olympic gold and then get my black belt? These were dinner conversations.
What did your dad have to say about that?
Ask mommy.
Yeah, exactly. There's some fights you just don't step into, right. I guess.
Exactly. Well, because my father being, he was in his own right. I mean, first of all, he's from samurai lineage, all the way back to, he's from Kumamoto, Kyushu, and Jakushin Kanakogi was the samurai of Kyushu back then. So Kanakogi Castle, which is now Kumamoto Castle, was our castle. And of course, I've gone to Japan and visited the castle and told everybody, get out of my house, but that really just doesn't work. I've tried to claim princess status on my driver's license. That still doesn't work. But, coming from that lineage, and even one step further, the cave that my family history owned is the same cave that Miyamoto Musashi wrote the Book of Five Rings. He sat in that cave on that rock. So there's that lineage connection. But yet my father will say, still, go ask mommy about the black belt. And people expected me to.
But just like Musashi, know the battles you're fighting. Choose your battles wisely.
Musashi said, "Speak less."
That is absolutely amazing. So tell us about your competitive career, and I know before we started recording, you mentioned a really big match. I was hoping you wouldn't mind repeating how that that stays in your mind and your memory.
Sure. Well, there's actually a few matches that really stand out, and one of them that one was at the U.S. Open where I was about to compete in against the person who just won the world championship. So I was about to compete against the world champion. And as I think at that time, I probably had my black belt by that time. And one of my training partners, fantastic guy, Jimmy, was massaging my arms. My arms were cramped. I just finished fighting 3 or 4 matches immediately prior. I was terrified, but yet I thought I was ready. I didn't know if I was ready. He hauls off and belts me right across the face, and I just looked at him like, I will deal with you later. And he said, "Yep, you're ready." And what a great training partner. And I went out there and I competed and I won and I beat the world champion. And what a feeling. And then I realized, like, oh gosh, I have to keep going now. I have to keep this up. There's a lot of pressure when you win, when you're at the top of your game. So that's one match. But there was another match that was a very trying match, and it can really explore the interaction between mother and coach. And I forgot what tournament this was. I was competing in the open division, and at that time my mom was the referee. So she, not my referee, but one of the referees. So she couldn't coach from the side of the mat, but I could still see her, and I could still see her face. And her face, I could just look at it and know what she was coaching me, what she was thinking to do. I remember we went down to mat work, and the woman choked me. And she choked me so bad where the spots were about to happen, and I was starting to see the little sweet speckles right before you take a nap for a while. But I looked at my mom, and I just couldn't give up. And all I could see was that piercing look of that, you get up, you fight. And I don't know what happened, but it looked like an episode of the Hulk, where the woman had a choke on me. She was walking the choke around, literally trying to rip my head off. My lips were blue, my face was pale, and I stood up with this lady hanging on my neck. And the look right then and there was that on my mom's face was, number one, the relief of a mother seeing her kid getting choked, and number two, of the proud look, and the third look was, now you demolish her. So all three of those looks. So it was such an interesting relationship, having her as a mother and a coach. And what saved me is my mother, and any one of her students can attest, she had a choke that you could not escape. I don't know if it was the knuckles in the side of your neck, but there is not one person she couldn't choke. She choked Radomir Kovacevic, the 6'7" at the time Yugoslavian Olympian. She choked anybody. She choked the Haitian heavyweight fighter. You cannot escape this woman's choke. So the fact that she choked me regularly, first of all, being able to boast and saying my mom choked me regularly, and gave me sort of like a rubber neck. I would challenge my friends. Go ahead, try to choke me. It doesn't work. So I think that's what saved me. But then knowing that she was my mom, and it must have been so. I wish she was still here, because I'd love to ask her, how did it feel watching your kid fight, getting into a fist fight, getting picked on the mat sometimes if there was some inequity in matchup? And how did it feel like to try to separate mother and coach? Because I know as a daughter, I would look to her as mother and coach, but if I got hurt, I'd first look to her as coach, then as mother. I remember that I competed there was one local tournament where I was competing against somebody. She was older and seasoned, and she was fighting very unfair. Like, we were doing some sort of grip fighting, and she just kept on like pulling my hair and punching me in the face. And I'm thinking to myself, well, this isn't the judo I learned. You're not allowed to do this. But the referee was half blind and probably didn't see it or just looked away or was whatever the case is. My mother got so ticked off. She walked on the mat and she told this woman, you want to fight like that, you fight me. You want to fight fair, you fight her. I couldn't believe that she did that. And nobody was going to stop this force. Nobody was going to stop Rusty when she did that.
Wonderful. Well, I mean, it's unfortunate, but, for the listeners who don't know, obviously judo does not allow strikes, but there are a lot of tricky ways to get around that when the ref is not looking, and to uppercut people with the collar grip, to headbutt them. And my wife had one experience that she was competing in a grappling match. It wasn't judo, but kind of same thing. And the girl looks and she said, oh, the ref's not looking. And then she quickly headbutted my wife 3 times. And but it didn't help. She still lost anyway. But unfortunately, the martial arts spirit of fair play is not with everybody all the time. So it is what it is. But I'm glad she put a stop to it.
But you know what? You learn about that, and that teaches you about life, because a lot of life is not fair. And that's one thing that Rusty would always remind everybody, her students. I mean, she was the mother of not only women's judo, she was all of our mother. And she would tell you, look, life is not fair, but if you stay in shape, if you are able to be with your judo family and train, do the right thing. You follow the jitakyoe, follow the mutual benefit for all, bow to your opponent and thank them for making you better, then maybe you could just get along in life a little bit better when the unfairness comes your way. You don't just lay down and give up. Because when they took her medal away in 1959, she didn't lay down and give up and say, oh, this is so unfair. I can't, this is not right. Somebody should do something. Rusty was that somebody, and Rusty did that something. And then in 2009, about 3 months prior to her passing, the YMCA gave her medal back.
Yes, that's wonderful.
And returned her medal 50 years later. But they righted the wrong. So with this book, the Get Up and Fight is something, first of all, I heard all of the time in every aspect, but it's a book not about judo only. It's about inspiring others to get up and do their fight. And their fight doesn't have to be physical. Their fight could be just something simple as getting dressed and going outside, or getting up and brushing their teeth. That could be their fight. Get up and fight another day. If you're having a hard day, get up and fight for just one more day each day. This book also inspires people because Rusty's story, she was an ordinary person from a poor family that her babysitters were what they called back then from the freak show in Coney Island, the Pinhead Sisters. So she knew that it was wrong to make fun of people just because they looked different or they acted different. She knew, you know what, it's about how they treat people. It's about how you build your character. And it's about, Rusty's quoted as not taking crap from anyone. You have to do that, get up and fight. You have to be empowered, reach in, grab your own true grit, and inspire others. It's not just what you do for yourself, because doing for yourself is nothing, but it's what you do for everybody. And that's why this book is so important, because it's a message. It's a message of, today's narrative is highlighting diversity and inclusion. Well, diversity and inclusion was every day of our life. Our dojo was in the middle of Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn, in one of the roughest areas, graffiti ridden, and they wanted it there because they wanted the inner city kid to have the same opportunity as the kids on the Upper West Side to practice judo. And that's where they came together. So kids from private schools would practice with judo with the inner city kids in our dojo, and you were all one. There was no difference. It didn't matter where you left and went home to, and it didn't matter where you came from. They would travel together as a group. The ethnicities, the cultures, we were just one. We stepped on the mat.
And it's interesting because I think that so follows the founder, Kano Jigoro's concept of judo as a bridge between cultures. And one of the judoka that I really respect, he eventually went into MMA, but his name's Nakai Yuki, and he says, "I believe in martial arts communication," and I love that. I love that expression because I've never seen such diverse and egalitarian spaces as the martial art mat, particularly the judo mat, where everybody's welcome and it's just, and that's true. Like, I lived in Japan, and of course I'm not Japanese. And, there were some spaces in Japan where I was not welcome. Well, guess what? On the martial art mats, I was always welcome if I worked hard. That's it. And I never felt any type of discrimination whatsoever or anything. And wherever I've traveled around the world, the martial artists were always the most welcoming and the most friendly. They give me a sort of brotherhood. You go to any judo school anywhere in the world, and you visit, and you instantly get a great welcome. And that's happened to. I was traveling in France recently, and it's not recently. It's already 2 years ago. But the pandemic just kind of screws with your sense of time. But I went and I went to visit a martial art friend of mine, and he's training in a judo school outside of Paris, and I went to see the judo sensei, and I said, "Oh yeah, I trained judo in Japan," and we're instant friends. Within 30 seconds, you trained judo, I trained judo, great. This is wonderful. We're brothers now, and I've never experienced that in any other side of my life, and it's just a wonderful thing that the mats can be such a unifying place and a place of inclusion and egalitarianism and progressivism.
That's so true. In the judo world, in our dojo, everybody was welcome. So you got an inner city kid who I spoke with, and now is a grown-up, who said that the only place that he actually felt that he belonged and that somebody cared about him was in our dojo. We had a sliding scale fee. As long as we could pay the rent and keep the lights on, my parents never made a profit. They did it for the labor of love. And just hearing that this was the only place that he could feel that somebody cared about him, because he would go home and be beaten or tormented, but yet he came to judo and he felt free. But he never expressed it, but that was his family, and he would do anything. He would stay and clean the mats just with everybody else. And it's interesting because everybody from the black belts to the white belts, we would all get on our hands and knees and clean the mats, and there was no difference. But yet our dojo was frequently visited by international Olympians. Mr. Yamashita was at our dojo quite often, and he stayed with my family and visited us. And Mr. Yamashita, I believe, is he the head of the Japanese Olympic Committee now?
Yes, yeah. And for those who don't know, 1984 gold medalist. Right.
Yes, and I think he's also a world record for winning the most matches ever in history.
Oh, really? So, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. And we had Ingrid Bergman's Olympic gold medalist, and Eve Aronoff, Olympian, training in our dojo regularly. Eve was part of our dojo, but the visitors we've had from around the world, men and women, in our humble little dojo in the middle of Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn, where even the name of it was Kyushu School of Judo and Self-Defense, and they even spelled defense wrong. It was such a rough area. I guess they were scared to fix it, but that is so true about judo family and martial arts family. We have a lot, there's a lot of that in other groups, like in law enforcement, brothers and sisters, but there's nothing better than rolling around and beating each other up to be able to call each other brother and sister.
Absolutely. Matt, do you have anything to add to conversation?
I mean, it may have already happened, so excuse my ignorance, but is there a movie coming out about your mother and your life? Like, there has to be.
Oh, yeah, that would make a great movie.
Well, it would be an amazing movie. So there are some suitors. Yeah. Let's keep it at that. But okay. I have to tell you that this would be an amazing story, because the world needs a Rusty. The world needs to know that they can get up and fight. And it's not only just about Rusty, it's a love story, the love for martial arts, the love for my father who left his country to come and find my mother in America, and the love of including everybody and wanting to give everybody a piece of that get up and fight, that inspiration, and to know that just an ordinary person can change the world. Just knowing that we all have that power within us is a great message. So yes, there needs to be a movie about Rusty.
I can't wait.
A miniseries. It's got to be. I need more. No, I don't
You
just
need
want
more?
one
You want-
movie, a trilogy or something.
Like Miyamoto Musashi's, there's 3 movies for him, so you have to have 3 movies for it. No, but it's funny because this is this sort of thing. There's so many amazing martial artists from the age when I was younger, and it's one of the things I like to do in this podcast is highlight those people who contributed to the world that we know today. Well, some of those people are being forgotten. And in our last podcast, I mentioned some people passed away. Of course, Koga passed away, and it's very sad. And it's after I said that, some people said, "Oh, I had no idea who Koga was." I'm like, "How do you not know these people?" But that's the nature of time. That of course the new generations don't follow the generations before, but I think it's absolutely important to know whose shoulders you're standing on. That the world we know today, the opportunities you have were built and created there by these wonderful people that passed. Particularly your mother's been such an inspirational point of world judo, but also in my personal experience, I grew up here in New York, and I know you couldn't talk about New York judo unless you talked about Rusty Kanagogi. And some people say, love her or hate her, she made New York judo, and you can't say one without the other,
That's true. That's true. But not only in New York. I mean, well, everybody knew Rusty in New York. She'd walk into the room and she just had this presence because she believed in accountability. So it was no nonsense, no
nonsense, and call people on their crap.
Absolutely. And again, circling back to why not? Well, we can't do this. Well, why not? And hold people accountable. Matter of fact, even our logo for the first Women's World Judo Championships is an actual photograph of 2 of her students throwing each other. That's the authenticity. And when they told Rusty that women's judo is not allowed in the National Sports Festival, well, why not? And she called Ted Turner and she said, well, why not? And I even found a letter saying, well, I'm sorry, we can't include women's judo in the National Sports Festival. Her response, why not? So in New York State Judo, she ran New York State Judo for a number of years, but she held everybody accountable to tell the truth, to be honest, and really uphold the principles of judo as opposed to muddy it with drama and
politics or corruption.
And,
yeah.
Yes.
Which is why... Drama. Right. I don't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
No, please go ahead.
No, but it's people who don't know that American judo for a long time was a disaster because of politics and corruption and certain people just creating their own organizations for status or what have you. And New York was able to insulate itself from that and still have wonderful dojos and wonderful competitive things and camps that I like I told you, I went to a judo camp in 1988, 89, somewhere on there. It's summer camp. And, only a great experience. Little did I know that, off in California or Colorado, there's all this like drama and things like that. And you never experienced that because it was run properly here.
That's so true. I think you and I were probably at the same judo camp because I was always at the judo camps. We had to have been. But you're right. As far as the politics and the drama, that's where I learned early on as a teenager what delusions of grandeur meant, because people would create their own sub-organizations and then promote themselves like, hey, look at this, I'm a 10th Dan. Like,
yes.
Wow, okay, can you do a breakfall? So, but Rusty was about accountability. And back then, U.S. Judo, you're absolutely right, was a disaster. They were the misogynists. That Frank Fullerton did everything he could to obstruct women's judo. And now I have to give highlights and kudos to Keith Bryant, who has turned USA Judo around as much as he can. And he is a full supporter of women in judo, of equality, and he is really doing everything above and beyond for U.S. judo and for women's judo. So what a difference to watch how it evolved and watch how the politics the negativity will never survive. Mom used to always say that crap floats and then it floats away. So with a little pushing, you can flush it.
I'll put that on a shirt. If that's not on a shirt right now, you got to print them today.
I think we're onto something.
This has been so wonderful. So people can get the digital book on Amazon. They can also go to the rustykonagogi.com for the autograph version. And anything else you'd like to promote as well in terms of the book or anything in general?
No, but I do want to say thank you both for your time. This has been absolutely terrific. It's been so fun to think about these memories and my training partners and just the great times. And I really just want to say thank you to Rusty for giving me the skills and the tools so that I can keep paying it forward and helping people in law enforcement, in judo, in sports, and generally in life. So Rusty gave me this and my father gave me this. I'm a combination of both of them.
Well, I have to say it's an immense opportunity and honor and privilege to have you here. It's just fantastic. And while today was to really more discuss your mother, I would love to have you on again and discuss your own prodigious achievements, particularly in the realms of law enforcement. And you're such a wonderful progressive voice on the issues of humane restraint, which is something that obviously is very, very current. So you have an open opportunity to come back anytime you want. It's just an absolute honor to talk to you. And while my academy is closed right now, I'm hoping that someday we could share the mats together and I could learn from you as well.
Vice versa. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. And thanks to your mother for all the work she did.
Yeah.
Aw, thanks, Matt.
I'm trying to get him, I think he's perfect for a heavyweight judo fighter. Don't you think the build?
I just want to choke you.
Well, I've heard that before. All right. We got to go.